The night I caught my husband with my best friend. I laughed, a broken little sound that didn't even feel like mine. I thought I'd seen the worst kind of betrayal. Oh, how wrong I was. That was before I found the dusty suitcase under a motel bed, $70,000 in cash, a plane ticket, and a note that said, "Find out why your mother died." Tell me, what would you do if the truth came wrapped in money and a warning? Rain pressed softly against the windows, whispering to the city like it knew my secret. I walked through empty streets, shoes splashing in puddles, heart splintering with every step. Ha ha ha, can you imagine? Laughing in the middle of heartbreak because it's either that or collapse right there on the pavement. Every echo sounded like goodbye. To love, to home, to who I used to be. The city was alive, cars, laughter, lights, but I was already a ghost. Watching life happen from behind invisible glass, floating somewhere between disbelief and numbness. The air smelled of wet asphalt and betrayal. My fingers trembled. My breath came in broken pieces. I could still hear his voice, calm, defensive, that same soft tone he used to lie to me. "It's not what you think." Oh, but it was. It was exactly what I thought. I stopped outside the cafe where we used to meet, staring at my reflection in the window. Pale face, damp hair, eyes hollow but dry. How can someone look so alive? And so gone at the same time? Ah, poor fool. The version of me that believed in forever was dying right there, and I didn't even cry. When the first taxi stopped, I froze. The driver asked, "Where to?" I wanted to say home, but the word caught in my throat. Home was gone, stolen, burned, erased. I whispered the address of a cheap motel instead. My voice didn't even sound like mine. The motel was nothing like the life I'd built, flickering neon, walls that smelled of smoke and loneliness. The woman at the desk didn't ask questions. People like me never want to be remembered. She handed me a key painted in fading gold. Room 14, just another ghost checking in. Inside, the silence screamed, the kind that presses against your skin, heavier than noise. I sat on the bed in my soaked clothes and stared at the window as rain traced the glass like tears I couldn't cry. Weeping came later, soft, shaking, ugly. Every memory cut a little deeper. Every laugh, every promise, every "I love you." Lies. All of it. Yet, under the ache, something small flickered. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was awareness. The first fragile spark of a woman waking up after a long sleep. My old life was dead. And if I wanted to live, I would have to become someone else. Someone who wouldn't beg to be loved. When dawn crept in, pale and shy, I was still sitting by the window. The world outside yawned awake. Cars, light, life. And there I was in room 14, quietly burying my old self. Before everything fell apart, my life had looked perfect. Mornings with sunlight curling through the curtains, coffee brewing, his voice reading the news like music. Ha ha ha. Funny how you can mistake comfort for happiness. I thought love was steady, safe. I thought that was enough. But love without honesty is just silence with pretty wallpaper. Our apartment was not extravagant, but it was ours. A quiet 2-bedroom space, with walls we painted together, pale gray with hints of blue, because he said the color looked like calm oceans. I remember laughing when we spilled paint on the floor, both of us slipping and giggling like children. Ha ha ha, we thought that mess was love. The living room held photographs of smiles that seemed eternal then. Oh. I memorized every corner of that space, never imagining that someday I would be too afraid to walk through it again. He worked long hours, but I never complained. I used to think dedication was love's highest form. When he said he was traveling for business, I would pack his clothes neatly, slipping a note into his bag. "Stay safe. Come home soon." I smiled while writing it, believing it meant connection. Now I know it meant distance I was too naive to see. And Natalie? My best friend. My mirror, my comfort. She was a constant presence in those days. We shared everything. Laughter, secrets, heartbreaks, dreams. Thursday nights were ours. She brought wine. I ordered dinner. We'd curl up on the couch and talk about everything and nothing until midnight blurred into morning. Ah, those nights. We'd laugh until tears rolled down our cheeks. She knew every hope I had, every fear, every doubt about myself. I believe that made us close. I never realized it made me exposed. At work, life was predictable. Same chair, same desk, same tiny victories. I managed marketing campaigns that no one really remembered, but I did them with pride. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. My desk overlooked the parking lot, and sometimes I would stare out the window, wondering what would happen if I stopped playing it safe, if I just jumped. Ha ha ha. Foolish daydreams. I'd shake my head and tell myself that comfort was better than chaos. Stability was love's reward, or so I thought. On weekends, we would walk by the waterfront. He'd hold my hand, talk about his clients, his big plans, and I'd listen, heart full, thinking how lucky I was. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence, look at me and say, "You have no idea how much I need you." And I'd smile, believing every word. But now I know he didn't need me. He needed my belief in him, that blind, unconditional faith that made him feel like a god. My mother used to tell me, "Real happiness is quiet. You must listen closely to hear it." I clung to that. I mistook silence for peace. I ignored the way his phone stayed face down, the subtle distance in his eyes, the way his laughter changed when Natalie was near. Weeping now, I can see it all so clearly. They were fragments of truth scattered across ordinary days. But I was too busy being grateful to notice the cracks forming beneath my feet. The night before everything changed, we had dinner together. He was distracted, scrolling through messages between bites, claiming work was overwhelming. I remember touching his hand, smiling gently. "You seem far away," I said. He smiled that soft, practiced smile. "You worry too much." I laughed, of course, because that's what love taught me. To laugh instead of question, to trust instead of doubt. I believed him. Oh, how I believed him. I didn't know that the next day would shatter every version of trust I'd ever known. If I close my eyes, I can still see that dinner, the dim light, the smell of roasted garlic, the faint hum of the music in the background. Everything felt so normal. Perfect even, That's the cruel thing about betrayal. It doesn't come knocking. It hides behind laughter, behind soft smiles, behind the comfort of an ordinary night you think you'll remember fondly. In the early years, success felt like love made visible. He had that spark, the kind of ambition that could hypnotize a room. I adored it. I believed in him more than he believed in himself. Every late night, every presentation, every pitch, it was all ours, or so I thought. I stood beside him through it all, blind to the truth that I was helping build an empire that would one day push me out. When we met, he was full of plans. His tiny consultancy was just a seed then, fragile but full of promise. I became his partner, reviewing proposals, correcting his drafts, staying awake past midnight, eyes heavy, formatting his slides while he rehearsed. "You're my lucky charm," he'd say, laughing, kissing my forehead. My secret weapon, those words. I wore them like a crown. I never noticed how often we became I as his success grew. The first office he rented was above a cafe. It smelled like roasted beans and ambition. I helped paint the walls, choosing a deep green he said would bring prosperity. "Ha ha ha," I teased him, told him he was superstitious. He laughed and pulled me close, whispering that we'd grow together, if only I'd known. If only laughter didn't echo so beautifully before it breaks into silence. He joked that I was his unpaid interior designer, and I laughed. Ha ha ha. Proud, happy even, that I could contribute in any way. When clients visited, I brewed coffee, offered my warmest smile, and greeted them as if they were family. I was convinced we were building something permanent, something that would always include both of us. As contracts multiplied, so did his confidence. The man who once wore wrinkled shirts now buttoned up in tailored suits that cost more than our rent had been in those early days. Business dinners replaced evenings at home. I told myself that was what success looked like. Oh, silly me. I stayed behind to keep our world balanced. Bills paid, house tidy, birthday cards sent, love intact. Stability was my role, I decided, while his was to conquer the world. He never asked me to, but he never stopped me either. Friends used to compliment us. You two are perfect together, they said. He couldn't have done it without you. And I smiled every time. Ha ha ha. Smiling so easily, so proudly, unaware that the foundation beneath our perfect picture was already cracking. The empire we were building looked solid, but the space it left for me was shrinking, piece by piece. Sometimes, late at night, he would talk about the future, expansion, investors, power, more, always more. His eyes would shine with that same passion that made me fall in love with him years ago. And I'd imagine myself standing beside him, celebrating every victory, just as we always promised. But as his world grew, mine grew smaller. He began traveling more, always for business, surrounding himself with people whose admiration came easily. Ha ha ha. I even teased him once, saying he loved attention more than sleep. And among those faces was Natalie. At first, she was just another name. Another handshake at a company event. I never imagined she would become the crack that split my life open. Looking back now, I realize I built him a throne while standing on my knees. Every spreadsheet I organized, every word I proofread, every dinner I forgave him for missing, each one added another brick beneath his feet. Until one day, when he finally looked down, I wasn't beside him anymore. I was beneath him, unseen, unnecessary, invisible. That was the tragedy of building his empire. It was never truly ours. The change didn't happen in one dramatic storm. No, it crept in quietly, disguised as harmless jokes and soft dismissals. At first, I told myself it was work stress, poor man. He's tired. He's just overwhelmed. I didn't realize the tiny fractures were already splitting through everything we'd built. He started interrupting me mid-sentence. Not in anger, worse, in impatience. During dinners with clients, I became part of the background decor. The woman beside him smiling when required, nodding when appropriate. I'd try to join the conversation, to remind him I was more than an accessory, and his hand would brush mine under the table, gentle, but firm. A silent command to be quiet. Let me handle this, he'd whisper later, smiling that charming smile everyone adored. Ha ha ha, oh, that smile. The one that made me feel like I'd done something wrong just by existing too loudly. Our evenings at home turned into empty rituals. He would come in still talking on the phone, words like strategy, merger, expansion, replacing goodnight kisses. I'd wait, patient, rehearsing small stories about my day. Something funny from work, a memory from before we were married, something to make him look up and laugh. But when he finally ended his call, his eyes were glazed with exhaustion, not affection. Can we talk later? He'd say, already reaching for another glass of whiskey. And later never came. Natalie noticed before I did. He seems distracted lately, she said one Thursday evening, while pouring wine into our favorite glasses, the same ones we used to toast to our dreams. I smiled, forcing a lightness into my voice. Everyone gets busy, she smiled too, softly, almost pitying. Oh, that soft, knowing smile. The kind that makes your stomach twist without reason. She sipped her wine slowly, her eyes studying me too closely as if she already knew something I didn't. I brushed it off. I was grateful at least that she cared enough to notice. Ha ha ha, how naive. I thought her concern was friendship. I didn't realize it was guilt wrapped in sympathy. The first real sting came during a dinner party at our home. He'd invited colleagues to celebrate closing a major deal. I spent all afternoon cooking, decorating, trying to make everything perfect. The smell of roasted rosemary and butter filled the kitchen. Laughter floated in from the living room. I remember looking at him, the way his tie gleamed under the soft light, how easily he commanded attention. My heart swelled with pride. When his team arrived, he stood tall and charming, shaking hands, smiling wide. Then, with that same effortless grace, he introduced everyone with pride, everyone except me. He called me his lovely support system. Ah. The room laughed politely. I laughed too. Ha ha ha. The kind of laugh that hurts your throat. The kind you use to hide a crack in your heart. I smiled for his colleagues, pretending not to notice the way my name had disappeared from my own home. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the guests were gone, I finally asked him, why would you say that? Why would you call me that in front of them? He shrugged, pouring himself another drink. You're overreacting. Overreacting. The word landed like a slap made of silk. I wanted to weep, to scream, to throw the glass that was still sitting in my hand. But instead, I laughed. Ha ha ha. A dry, broken sound that tasted like surrender. I walked away that night knowing something inside me had shifted. That whatever this was, whatever we had been, it was starting to rot from the inside. And yet even then, even with the silence between us stretching longer than the nights themselves, I still believed. Oh, foolish heart. I still believed love could fix it. For 2 hours, strangers admired my work, asked about my inspiration, and treated me like an artist. Instead of an accessory, for the first time in years, I felt seen. My heart fluttered with a kind of joy I had almost forgotten existed. When I came home, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. The room was quiet, too quiet. I placed the small event badge on the dresser beside his watch. Ha ha ha. A tiny symbol of something so big. A silent proof that I had finally started to exist beyond him. I did not know then that my dream would be the very thing that exposed his betrayal. Or that the person who had praised my courage the most was the one already tearing my world apart. The invitation arrived on embossed paper trimmed with gold foil, fancy, cold, and gleaming like the world he now belonged to. Corporate Excellence Gala, it read. My hands trembled as I traced the letters. An event celebrating industry leaders, innovators, dreamers, the very people I had helped him impress for years, without ever standing beside him on stage. When he asked me to attend this time, a spark of hope, soft, desperate, flickered in my chest. Perhaps he had finally seen me, remembered who had been there through every sleepless night and early victory. I spent hours preparing, more nervous than I should have been. The dress I chose shimmered softly under the light. The same color he once said made my eyes look alive. I smiled at my reflection, whispering, ha ha ha, maybe tonight will be different. I told myself the distance between us might finally shrink under the weight of old memories. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Music swelled from the grand piano in the corner, mingling with the low hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. Oh, it was beautiful, painfully beautiful. He looked at home here, confident, composed, shaking hands with men whose suits cost more than our first car. I followed a step behind, smiling politely at strangers, the perfect reflection of a supportive wife. When the host called his name to the stage, pride fluttered briefly in my chest. I straightened, my heart pounding. He walked to the microphone with the practiced charm of someone who had been waiting for this spotlight his entire life. None of this, he began, would have been possible without the people who stood beside me. Aw. My heart lifted, my breath caught. For a single fragile moment, I thought, he means me. Then, ha ha ha. In front of hundreds. He turned toward Natalie. She has been my rock, my guiding voice, my most trusted confidant. The words hung in the air, graceful, polished, and sharp enough to cut through bone. The audience clapped, unaware of the betrayal written beneath his tone. Natalie smiled from her table, eyes glinting beneath the golden lights. My pulse roared in my ears. My smile froze. My breath shortened, caught in my throat. He kept talking, weaving gratitude and jokes into a speech that erased me entirely. Each sentence chipped away at what little remained of my pride. I glanced at Natalie again, her posture perfect, her expression soft and knowing. Around us, applause filled the room like a storm. My hands stayed still in my lap. I felt them tremble but forced them flat against the silk of my dress. When he descended from the stage, I stood to greet him. Ha ha ha. The way a trained actress stands for her cue. But he barely glanced at me. Smile, he whispered, lips barely moving. Everyone's watching. His hand touched the small of my back, gentle in gesture, cruel in meaning. I smiled for the cameras because dignity was all I had left. Dinner blurred into noise and laughter I could not join. The clink of silverware became unbearable, each sound another reminder that I was invisible in a room I had helped him reach. Ha ha ha. Oh, how cruel life can be. When dessert was served, I excused myself quietly, voice trembling, and stepped outside. Onto the terrace. Cold air met my skin like a slap. I gasped, eyes stinging. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass railing, indifferent to my collapse. I leaned against it, breathing slowly, trying to keep the tears from falling. Inside, I could still hear his laughter, loud, charming, familiar. That same laugh that once made me fall in love. How long, I wondered. How long had he been rehearsing this act? How long had she known her lines? A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Are you all right? It was a waiter, young, kind-eyed. His concern cracked something inside me. I nodded, unable to speak, afraid that if I opened my mouth, the truth, or a sob, would spill out. He hesitated, then said gently, "Sometimes leaving is the most graceful way to be seen." Those words, they pierced through the fog inside me, gentle but deep. I turned back toward the ballroom, where the man who had once promised me forever now stood beside the woman who had borrowed my trust. And for the first time, I realized that walking away might be the only way to finally be seen. My hand trembled as I reached for my purse. I left my napkin folded neatly on the chair, untouched dessert still glistening in the candlelight. As if perfection could hide pain. By the time he noticed I was gone, I was already outside, walking away under the rain that had begun to fall again. Soft, cleansing, merciful. The rain felt alive against my skin. The sound of rain followed me all the way to the street. It clung to my skin, each drop sharp and cold, as if the sky itself was asking how much more I could endure. Behind me, laughter still floated from the ballroom windows, soft, distant, and cruel. I did not look back. Looking back meant accepting the same humiliation twice. The valet called after me, holding an umbrella, but I shook my head. No! I wanted to feel the storm. I wanted every drop to wash away the perfume of betrayal still burning on my skin. My heels clicked against the marble steps, steady despite the shaking in my hands. Somewhere in that chaos of thunder and light, I realized I was free. Broken, yes, but free. The city lights blurred as I walked, tears mixing with rain. It was hard to tell which was which anymore. I did not have a destination. I only knew I had to move. Every step away from that building felt like reclaiming something invisible I had lost long ago. My silence, my dignity, myself. Cars rushed past. Horns echoed. People hurried under umbrellas. And yet it felt as if the whole world had gone quiet inside me. When I reached the edge of the street, I stopped under a flickering lamp. Water pooled around my feet, reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized. My dress clung to me. My hair tangled. Makeup streaked. But my eyes, they were clear for the first time in years. Clarity often comes not in comfort, but in collapse. I hailed a cab and gave the driver no address at first. He waited, glancing at me through the mirror, and finally asked softly, "Home, miss?" I almost laughed. Ha ha ha, home. The word felt foreign now, stripped of warmth and meaning. After a long silence, I whispered the address of a small motel on the edge of town. The car moved through the wet streets, wipers whispering rhythmically across the glass. The sound was almost soothing. I watched raindrops race down the window, each one carrying a memory I no longer wanted. The restaurant where we celebrated his first promotion. The store where he bought her a birthday gift disguised as something for a client. The park where we once planned a future that no longer existed. When we arrived, I paid the fare with trembling fingers and stepped into the yellow light of the motel sign. The air smelled of damp wood and dust, the kind of place where people went to disappear. As I turned the key to room 14, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time, there was no need to pretend. No one to impress, no role to play. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed, dripping water onto the floor, staring at the silence that surrounded me. It was heavy, but honest. Oh, honest silence. It had been so long since I'd heard that. I had walked away with nothing but the clothes on my back, yet somehow, I felt richer than I had in years. That night, I whispered to myself, weeping softly, "You have left everything behind. Now build something no one can take." The rain outside softened, as if the storm had finally run out of grief. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the betrayal, sleep came. Not peaceful, but real. Morning light crept through the thin motel curtains like an uninvited guest. It fell across the bed in fractured patterns, revealing a room that had not seen joy in years. The air smelled faintly of stale smoke and cleaning detergent, a mix that clung to everything it touched. I woke slowly, my mind still heavy with fragments of the night before, the laughter, the rain, the moment I decided to walk away. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. My hand reached instinctively for the other side of the bed, searching for the warmth that no longer belonged to me. The emptiness was colder than winter. The empty space was cold. It reminded me that this was not a nightmare I could wake from. Ha ha ha. No, it was my new beginning, stripped of all comfort. I sat up, running a hand through my damp hair and looked around. The wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners. The nightstand was missing a drawer. The lamp flickered, once, twice, when I switched it on. Everything about the room was temporary. And yet, there was a strange honesty in its imperfection. Nothing here pretended to be more than it was. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. One message from him: "You left before the event ended. We need to talk." No apology. No concern. Just control disguised as calm. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, my chest tightening. Then, with a shaky breath, I deleted the message without replying. I would not let his voice occupy space in my life anymore. The silence that followed was heavy. Oh, so heavy, but not unbearable. I stood, wrapping a towel around myself, and stepped into the shower. The water pressure was weak, but it was warm. As the water ran down my skin, I felt pieces of last night wash away. The perfume, the pretense, the ache. I stayed under the spray until the mirror fogged completely, until my reflection disappeared. And when I stepped out, I saw a different version of myself staring back. Tired, yes. Fragile, absolutely. But alive. I made instant coffee using the old machine by the sink. It sputtered and hissed like it might give up. And the first sip was bitter. But it grounded me. I sat on the bed with the mug cupped in my hands, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking of everything I had lost. A husband, a home, a best friend, a life I thought was mine. The weight of it pressed down hard. My throat tightened. But beneath that weight, something small and stubborn was beginning to move. It was not hope yet, but it was close. Hours passed in slow, quiet motions. I opened my laptop, stared at an empty document, and tried to write. Nothing came out. My thoughts were tangled threads. Laughter and betrayal knotted together. I closed it again, exhaling a long, shaky sigh, and let the silence return. Outside, a neon sign blinked vacancy in steady rhythm. Blink, pause, blink. And I realized that every person here probably had a story like mine. People who had lost something. People who had nowhere else to go. There was comfort in that thought. A tiny, fragile comfort. I was not alone in my brokenness. That night, I ate instant noodles with a plastic fork, sitting cross-legged on the bed. It was not glamorous, but it was survival. And as strange as it sounded, survival felt like victory. I had walked away from everything that had defined me. and I was still breathing. Before turning off the light, I whispered a promise into the still air. One day you will look back at this night and thank it for breaking you. The room said nothing, of course, but somewhere deep inside, a small part of me believed it was listening. The fourth morning in that motel began like all the others, quiet, gray, and heavy with routine. I brewed another bitter cup of instant coffee, scrolled through unanswered job applications, and tried to convince myself that someday soon, things would make sense again. The air conditioner rattled above me like an old clock counting down to nothing. I was surviving, not living. When I bent to pick up my phone charger from the floor, it slipped from my hand and rolled under the bed. I sighed, really sighed, kneeling down to reach for it. That was when my fingers brushed against something solid, smooth, cold, unfamiliar. My breath caught. I frowned, lowering myself further until my eyes could catch the faint outline beneath the dusty frame. There it was, a suitcase. Not the kind travelers carry these days, but the kind that belonged in another century. Brown leather, the surface worn and cracked like it had seen 100 stories before mine. Brass corners dulled by age. A luggage tag dangled from the handle, its edges frayed but still intact. I pulled it out slowly, my pulse quickening with each inch. The tag bore my full name, Samantha Marie Garrett. My handwriting. No, her handwriting. Aunt Helen's. My heart stuttered. My mouth went dry. The last time I saw that name written in her looping, deliberate script was on a birthday card she had mailed years ago. The one that arrived late and carried a quote about strength that felt too serious for a card. She had been dead for 9 months. I sat frozen on the floor, staring at the suitcase. How had it found me here? In a place I had chosen at random. A room I paid for in cash. A life no one knew about? The keyholes gleamed faintly under the light. My chest trembled. My eyes burned. And somewhere between fear and longing, I whispered her name, just once, before the silence swallowed it whole. I turned the suitcase over, searching for answers. My heart thudding, my breath shaky, and found a small plastic bag taped to the underside. Inside was a single key. My breath caught, sharp, trembling. Oh, Helen, of course. Helen had always been eccentric. Paranoid, the family called her. Ha ha ha, yes, they laughed. But she was also brilliant in her own quiet way. She hid things where only the determined would look. With trembling fingers, I peeled off the tape, freed the key, and slipped it into the lock. A soft click echoed through the room, too soft, too final. The lid lifted, and the scent of old paper and cedar drifted out, filling the air with something haunting, familiar. Inside lay bundles of cash, thick stacks of bills wrapped neatly in rubber bands. I gasped. Oh my God, my hands shaking. Beneath them, a folded piece of yellow legal paper. The top line written in the same sharp pen strokes I remembered. Samantha, this is just travel money. Real fortune is waiting at this address. Do not trust Justin. Do not trust Natalie. They have been planning this since before your wedding. Finish what your mother started before they silenced her. The words blurred as I read them again and again, my throat tightening, tears stinging, each line heavier than the last. A cold numbness spread through me. Justin, Natalie, my mother, Helen, silenced her. My mind spun like a wheel slipping on ice. Was she saying my mother's death was not an accident? That the man I had loved, the woman I had called sister, had been conspiring against me all along? It sounded impossible, insane. But then again, my entire life had already crumbled in ways I never thought possible. I stared at the cash, $70,000 by my rough guess. Enough to change a life. Enough to disappear. Enough to fight. The note trembled in my hand. Helen had never been wrong about the things she truly believed in. She was called paranoid because she noticed patterns others refused to see. What if this was her last warning? Her final act of love disguised as madness? My breath hitched. Oh, Helen. My lips quivered as the truth rippled through me. That night, I spread everything out on the bed. The money, the note, the plane ticket tucked neatly at the bottom of the suitcase. Destination, Portland, Oregon. Departure date, 4 days from now. I sat in silence, the hum of the air conditioner filling the room. The walls felt closer somehow, pressing in, as if the motel itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide. I could take the money and vanish into a new name, a new life, never looking back. Or I could follow the address, chase the truth, and finally learn why my mother's eyes had always carried sadness she never explained. My chest ached. I bit my lip to keep from weeping. The rain started again outside, tapping gently against the window. Steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trying to comfort me. I thought of the night I left that dinner, of the waiter's quiet words. Sometimes leaving is the most graceful way to be seen. Ha 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 ha. His voice echoed faintly now, bittersweet. But this time, leaving was not enough. I folded Helen's note carefully, hands trembling, placed it back inside the suitcase, and whispered to the empty room, "If this is madness, I will follow it to the end." My voice cracked, barely more than breath. The air conditioner stopped humming, and for one long heartbeat, the room went completely silent, utterly still, as if even the walls understood that something in me had just changed forever. The decision came quietly, like the soft closing of a door. By dawn, I had already chosen. There was no dramatic revelation, no tears, just the still certainty that staying meant surrender. And I had surrendered enough. The suitcase sat open on the motel bed, its contents organized into my new beginning. The cash was divided into envelopes and tucked into my bag. The note, creased from too many readings, slipped carefully into my journal. I stared at the plane ticket to Portland, the edges curled with age, the ink slightly faded. 4 days from now. My destination was already waiting. I called the airline, heart pounding, voice trembling as I confirmed the flight. The woman on the other end spoke in a polite monotone, distant, mechanical, asking for my ID, my date of birth, the booking reference. Each word she said made the moment more real. When she said, "You are all set, Ms. Garrett," I felt the first spark of something unfamiliar. It was not hope. It was purpose. That night I barely slept. My mind looped through memories, my mother's funeral, Helen's strange warnings, Justin's hollow apologies. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Sometimes I laughed, soft, broken laughter. And sometimes, without warning, I wept quietly into the darkness. They blended into one long, distorted dream. Blurred faces, fading voices, the echo of Helen's words spinning through the dark. When morning came, I packed lightly. One duffel bag, a coat, and the kind of determination that can only come from having nothing left to lose. My chest ached, but my hands were steady. The airport was small and anonymous, the kind of place where no one looks too closely at the faces passing by. I checked in early and found a seat near the window. Outside, planes taxied slowly under the weight of the morning mist. I caught my reflection in the glass. Tired, pale. Ha ha ha. Barely recognizable, but unmistakably alive. As I waited, I kept replaying Helen's words in my head. Finish what your mother started before they silenced her. Each repetition tightened something deep inside me, a slow twist of dread and resolve. My mother, Catherine Vaughn, had died in what police called a tragic accident 6 years ago. A rainy road, a sharp curve, a single car. She had been careful her entire life, seatbelt always fastened, never speeding, never reckless. The explanation had never felt right. But grief, oh grief, it makes people accept things they do not believe. Now, with Helen's note burning in my pocket, that unease returned, sharper this time, colder, cutting through every lie I'd ever swallowed. What if my mother's death was not an accident? What if Helen had been right all along? My throat tightened. I could almost hear Helen whispering, "Look closer, Sam." Look closer. The boarding call echoed through the terminal, a hollow sound that made my heart lurch. I stood, gripping my bag tighter. As I handed over my ticket, the gate agent smiled, gentle, polite, and said, "Safe travels." I almost laughed, a broken, breathless sound. Safe? Safety felt like a concept that no longer belonged to me. On the plane, I sat by the window, clutching the duffel bag that held the suitcase's contents. Every bump of turbulence made my heart skip, but my fear had changed shape. I was no longer afraid of what had happened. No, I was afraid of what I would find. As the plane lifted into the clouds, I looked down at the world shrinking beneath me. The highways, the rooftops, the endless pattern of ordinary lives. Somewhere below was the motel room where my old life had ended. I didn't feel sad leaving it behind. Oh no, it had served its purpose. That was the place where I had broken open enough to begin again. 3 hours later, Portland greeted me with a gray drizzle and a wind that smelled of pine and distant rain. I laughed softly to myself, a tired, wet laugh, and pulled my coat tighter. I rented a car using Helen's cash. The man at the counter did not ask questions, just slid the keys across with professional indifference. My fingers brushed the metal, cold and certain. The address from Helen's note led me out of the city, through winding roads lined with evergreens that leaned like silent witnesses. The houses grew farther apart until only the forest remained. I drove until the GPS voice said, "You have arrived." My stomach fluttered, a mix of fear and something close to awe. The house stood alone at the end of a gravel road, a small single-story place with weathered siding and boarded windows. The mailbox still read H. Vaughn, my aunt's handwriting again, faded but unmistakable. He lawn was overgrown, the air thick with silence. I sat in the car for a long time staring at the house. My pulse was steady, my breath shallow. Every instinct screamed turn back, please just go. But another voice, deeper, older, my mother's maybe, whispered no. This is where the truth waits. Finally, I stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath my boots, the sound sharp, startlingly loud in the quiet. My hands trembled as I reached for the door, locked, but the key from the suitcase fit perfectly. When it turned, a gust of air escaped from inside, stale, dry, untouched for months. The moment I stepped through that door, it felt like crossing into another world. Dust motes swirled in the slanted light like tiny ghosts, and everywhere I looked were traces of Helen, her books stacked in uneven towers, papers spread across tables, photographs pinned to corkboards with red string connecting them. My throat caught. I could almost hear her laughter, soft and knowing. It was not just a home. It was an archive. On the far wall hung a large corkboard filled with names, dates, and company logos. At the center, in bold marker, one word stood out, Meridian. A chill ran straight through me. My mother had worked for Meridian Pharmaceuticals until her death. I moved closer, fingertips brushing the edges of papers as if they might burn. Notes, documents, photographs, all scattered in frantic order. Some labeled trial records, others internal transfers, and one name repeated over and over, Richard Moss. Beneath it, a single line scrawled in Helen's familiar, urgent hand. Catherine knew. I stood there, silent, trembling, the weight of every secret pressing down, surrounded by the quiet hum of truths that had outlived their keepers. My lips parted, and before I could stop myself, a quiet, broken laugh escaped. Oh, Mom, what did you know? The world I thought I knew, my marriage, my friendships, even my mother's death, had just cracked open, revealing something vast and dark beneath it. My breath hitched. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. And in that still room, filled with dust and ghosts, I finally understood. The fortune Helen had promised was not just money. It was the truth. The moment I stepped inside Helen's house, time seemed to fold in on itself. The air felt thick, heavy with memories and dust. Every surface told a story. Papers stacked in uneven towers, yellowed clippings pinned to corkboards, photographs annotated with names and dates. The silence wasn't empty. It was watching, breathing almost. I swallowed hard, whispering a shaky laugh. Helen, what did you do? Helen had always been the family's mystery. To some, she was brilliant. To most, she was eccentric. Ha 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 ha. Yes, eccentric, they said. But I saw it now. It was something else. Growing up, I remembered her quiet intensity at family gatherings, how her eyes scanned rooms the way others read books. She would make vague comments about connections and patterns that no one else saw. I used to smile politely, certain she exaggerated. I was so wrong. Standing here now, I realized she had simply been paying attention. I ran my hand over the nearest stack of files, my fingers trembling, the labels handwritten in that same neat, deliberate style. Meridian Pharmaceuticals, Clinical Trials 2014-2018, Internal Memos, Restricted Access. The words alone sent a cold wave rolling through me. My mother had worked at Meridian until the day she died. My voice quivered, whispering her name, Mom. The floor creaked beneath me as I moved deeper into the house. There were maps taped to the walls, corporate diagrams, family trees, even news clippings with headlines about pharmaceutical lawsuits and sudden deaths. Helen had circled certain names in red ink. Some I recognized: Richard Moss, CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Others were strangers. But one name, written in the center of the largest map, stole my breath. Catherine Vaughn. My mother. Pinned beside her name was a short note in Helen's unmistakable handwriting. She discovered the falsified data. They silenced her before she could expose it. Trust no one from inside the circle. The words hit me like a blow. I sank into the old armchair by the window, the leather cracked and faded, my legs trembling. My throat tightened as tears welled and spilled without permission. Everything I thought I knew about my mother, her career, her integrity, her accident, suddenly rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. She had not just been a quiet accountant keeping track of numbers. She had been fighting something enormous, something dangerous. I let out a weak, breathless laugh, half sob. Oh, Mom, you were braver than I ever knew. A faint noise drew my attention, a steady hum from somewhere beneath the floorboards. My pulse jumped. I followed it to the back of the house, to a narrow hallway lined with filing cabinets. At the end stood a small wooden door, newer than the others, with a padlock gleaming faintly in the dim light. My fingers brushed over the final key from Helen's suitcase. My heart pounded, a rhythm of fear and wonder. When the lock clicked open, a gust of cold air brushed my face, sharp, metallic, alive. Behind the door was a short staircase leading down into darkness. I hesitated, my breath quick, uneven, whispering a soft, nervous laugh. Of course, Helen. A secret basement. My heart was hammering now, my throat dry. I switched on my phone's flashlight. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended into the unknown. Each step groaned, like the house itself was warning me to turn back. The basement was not what I expected. It was not dusty or abandoned. It was preserved. Industrial shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes labeled chronologically, some dating back decades. A generator hummed quietly in the corner, keeping the space cool and dry. At the center of the room was a table covered with documents and, of all things, a cassette recorder. I froze. Next to it sat a note, written in Helen's steady hand. Samantha, if you are here, then you are ready. Play this tape first. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely press play. The tape whirred, crackled, and then began. Hello, my dear, Helen's voice said. I gasped. My knees went weak. It was strange hearing her again. Older, raspier, but still precise. My lips trembled, and a tear rolled down my cheek as I whispered, Oh, Helen. If you have found this place, she continued, it means you have seen what they did. What they took. I tried to stop them. Your mother did too, but she was too close, and they made sure her silence looked like tragedy. Her words hit like thunder. I pressed a hand to my chest, gasping for air, weeping softly as the truth I had feared all my life finally began to speak back. Helen continued. Meridian's new pain management drug, Eclipsera, was falsifying its safety data. Catherine discovered discrepancies in the mortality rates during trials. She planned to leak the findings to regulators. But someone within the company found out. That someone was Richard Moss, and he did not act alone. I looked around the basement as her voice filled the air, realizing this was not just a conspiracy theory. It was evidence. Helen's tone softened. I know you are questioning everything right now. But listen carefully, Samantha. You have inherited more than loss. You have inherited proof. Proof of their crimes. Proof that your life was not ruined by accident but by design. The tape ended with a single sentence that chilled me to my core. Your husband, Justin, was not who you thought he was, and neither was your best friend. My grip on the recorder tightened until my knuckles turned white. I rewound it, certain I had misheard, but the words were the same. Helen had not spoken in riddles. She had spoken plainly, and it was worse than I imagined. Justin and Natalie. The betrayal that had shattered my marriage had not been emotional. It had been strategic. I remembered the way they had met. The seamless timing. The strange coincidences. It had all been arranged. I searched the shelves for anything else. My movements frantic now. In one folder labeled Private, Do Not Destroy, I found photos. My mother at a corporate event, standing beside Richard Moss, and, my breath caught, Justin. This was years before I had met him. Before me, before everything. A sob rose from my throat, quiet but sharp. Betrayal no longer felt like heartbreak. It felt like warfare. I collapsed into the chair beside Helen's desk, surrounded by ghosts and evidence. My mother had died trying to tell the truth. Helen had died protecting it. Now, it was my turn. I glanced at the note one last time. The words written at the bottom glowed faintly under the light. The truth will destroy them, if you are brave enough to use it. For the first time since losing everything, I smiled, because bravery, I realized, was all I had left. The cassette clicked again as I pressed play on the next tape. The air in that underground room felt heavier now, dense with anticipation and the scent of dust and cold metal. Helen's voice did not return this time. Instead, two male voices emerged through the static, familiar and venomous. The first belonged to Justin. I told you she's clean, he said, calm and businesslike. Catherine doesn't involve Samantha in work matters. She's protective, too careful, even at home. I can't get near any of the files she keeps off-site. The second voice was deeper, older, authoritative. Richard Moss. Then you need to find another angle, Moss replied. She has data that could destroy everything. I need access before she leaks it to the feds. My pulse began to roar in my ears. I leaned closer to the tape player, my hands trembling. Justin's voice again, softer now. Calculating. She trusts me. Her daughter trusts me. If I can't get the files, I can at least make sure Catherine stops asking questions. The silence that followed felt endless, until Moss spoke again. And if she doesn't? Justin hesitated. Then we make sure she can't. I froze. The sound of my heartbeat was louder than the recording. They were not just talking about silencing her. They were planning it. Moss's tone turned cold. You're a smart man, Justin. Accidents happen all the time. I'll handle the logistics. You handle her daughter. When this is over, you'll be taken care of. The tape whirred, then clicked off. I stared at the machine, unable to move. The man who had shared my bed, who had held my hand during my mother's funeral, had been discussing her death like a business strategy. Every memory twisted into something monstrous. The comfort of his arms. The way he'd told me to let the past rest. The fake concern. It was all part of a script. I forced myself to load another tape. This one was marked Natalie and Dr. S. Chin. At first, I thought it would be unrelated, until I heard Natalie's laugh. That same soft, familiar laugh that once filled my living room. She's falling apart, Natalie said. She thinks Justin's the only person left who understands her. I check in every few days, just to make sure she doesn't do anything stupid. The divorce hit her hard. Dr. Chin's voice was sharp and efficient. Good, keep her close. We can't risk her finding out what Catherine was working on. If she starts digging, she might stumble onto the records Helen has been hiding. She won't, Natalie said confidently. She trusts me completely. A weak laugh escaped me, broken, bitter. Ha 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 ha. How could I have been so blind? I felt bile rise in my throat. Every Thursday night wine session, every tearful you deserve better conversation. It had all been surveillance. My best friend had been watching me, for them. The tape continued. She's emotionally fragile, Natalie said. Once we finish this phase, she'll fade out of the picture. No job, no money, no credibility. By the time anyone listens to her, she'll sound paranoid, just like Helen. Oh, the words cut deep. I stopped the tape before it ended. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the player. The walls seemed to close in, pressing every word into my chest. My breath came in sharp bursts, shallow, uneven. And I stood, pacing the narrow basement, every step echoing off the concrete like a heartbeat too loud to bear. For a long time, I had thought betrayal was an emotional wound. Now I understood. It was a weapon. I had been their project. My entire life had been stage managed for destruction. I laughed once, hollow, trembling. Ha ha ha. What a cruel performance it had been. I went back to the table and reached for another file marked Correspondence. Inside were printed emails and financial documents. The transactions between Meridian and Justin were there in black and white, monthly payments labeled as consulting fees. Natalie's name appeared too, disguised under a fake client account linked to Dr. Chin. My chest tightened, my throat burned. Helen had found everything. She had documented it all, right down to the dates of my mother's car accident and the internal emails sent within 24 hours of her death. One email from Moss read simply, "Situation resolved. Proceed with cleanup. Ensure Helen Vaughn remains contained." My breath caught, hard. They had planned to silence Helen, too. She must have known. That was why she built this archive. Why did she send the suitcase? Why did she leave me the note? My voice cracked as I whispered her name. Oh, Helen. My tears came fast, burning hot against my cheeks. I sat down, clutching the paper to my chest. For a long moment, I just let the grief wash through me. Grief for my mother, for Helen, and for the woman I had been before I knew any of this. Then, slowly, grief hardened into something sharper. Justice. I gathered every document into neat piles, labeling them the same way Helen had. My mother's legacy was here, proof that she had not died for nothing. And now it was my turn to finish what she started. My hands steadied. My heart, though broken, found rhythm again. When I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the basement mirror. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, resolve etched into every line of my face. For the first time since the dinner that shattered everything, I felt something powerful awaken inside me. Not rage, not fear, purpose. I whispered to the air, my voice trembling but strong. You wanted me silent. You should have buried me deeper. Then I switched off the light and climbed the stairs, leaving Helen's house filled with ghosts, but carrying the truth they had died to protect. Outside, the rain had stopped. The wind was quiet. The night felt like the pause before a storm, and for the first time, I was ready to be the one who thundered. The next morning I awoke to a silence that felt different. Not empty, charged. The kind of quiet that comes before the first move in a long-awaited war. Sunlight filtered weakly through the dusty windows, painting thin gold lines across Helen's desk. The tapes, the files, the evidence, all of it was spread out before me like pieces on a chessboard, and I finally knew which side I was on. I brewed a cup of bitter instant coffee and stared at my reflection in the window, tired, scarred, trembling, but alive. Ha ha ha! Alive and ready! I looked nothing like the woman Justin had humiliated, or the one who had begged for explanations she never received. My face was the same, but my eyes had changed, steady, calculating, awake, ha ha ha. Awake in a way that burned. Helen's last note echoed in my mind. The truth will destroy them, if you are brave enough to use it. I pulled out my phone, breath shaky, fingers trembling, and scrolled through my contacts until I stopped on a number she had scribbled in one of her files. Agent Maria Torres. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Portland Division. Helen had underlined it twice and written beside it, "The only one who listened." My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. The line clicked, then rang once, twice, 3 times, my heartbeat matching every ring, before a brisk voice answered. "This is Agent Torres." For a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. "My name is Samantha Garrett," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, though it quivered. "You don't know me, but my aunt, Helen Vaughn, left me information about Meridian Pharmaceuticals. She said you were investigating them." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for doubt to creep in. I swallowed hard. Then her tone changed, sharp, alert. "Where are you right now, Ms. Garrett?" "At her property," I replied, glancing around the room, my voice barely above a whisper. "She left me files, recordings, documents. I think they're important. Do not move. Do not touch anything else," Torres said quickly. Her voice cut through the air like lightning. "Lock the doors and wait. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Before I could reply, the line went dead. The silence that followed roared in my ears. For the next 40 minutes, I sat perfectly still, the hum of the generator beneath the floor the only sound. Every creak of the old house made my pulse jump. My breath came out in little gasps. I half expected Justin or Natalie to burst through the door, but they were hundreds of miles away. And this time I was not the one being hunted. When the knock finally came, it was precise. 3 sharp raps. My heart stopped for a second. I peered through the window and saw a woman in her 40s, hair pulled back, blazer slightly damp from the rain. She held up a badge. "Agent Torres," she said. "FBI." I unlocked the door, my hands trembling, my throat dry. Torres stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the room. "You weren't exaggerating," she murmured. Her voice carried awe. "And wait." She walked toward the desk, eyes scanning the piles of evidence with the intensity of someone who had been waiting years for this moment. "I've seen fragments of this before," she said, opening one folder. "Your aunt sent copies of a few reports anonymously years ago. We could never verify them. Until now." Her tone carried both admiration and regret. Helen was brilliant. Too ahead of her time. The system called her paranoid because it was easier than believing her. A tear slipped down my cheek. "Oh, Helen." I could almost hear her soft laugh. I handed Torres the note and the first tape. "There's more," I whispered. "Recordings. Financial documents. Everything points to Meridian. And to my husband, Justin Garrett." Torres's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she said nothing. She simply nodded and began reviewing the materials. I watched as her face shifted, from skepticism to focus, to something close to fury. The air between us grew tense, charged as the truth settled in. "These are direct recordings of corporate conspiracy and homicide discussions," she said finally. "If authenticated, this could reopen the Vaughn case and expose 6 major players at Meridian. You understand what you're holding, right?" I nodded slowly. My throat felt raw. "The truth," Torres exhaled, long, heavy, almost a sigh. "And a target on your back." For the next few hours, she cataloged everything methodically. She photographed each document, sealed the originals in evidence bags, and took digital copies onto a secure drive. Her professionalism was reassuring, but even as she worked, I could see something else flickering in her expression: respect. When we finished, she closed her laptop and looked at me. Her voice softened, steady but warm. "You've done something extraordinary, Samantha. But this is where it gets dangerous. Meridian's executives won't go down quietly. They have lawyers, lobbyists, and friends in powerful places. You'll need to stay off their radar until we can make arrests." I folded my arms, feeling the steady pulse of resolve in my chest. My heart no longer raced, it burned. "I've already lost everything they could take," I said, voice shaking but sure. "I'm not afraid of what's left." Torres studied me for a long moment, her eyes glinting with something like admiration. Then she gave a small, approving nod, the kind that says you're not just surviving anymore, and for the first time, for the first time in too long. I almost smiled. In that case, We'll do this right. Torres's voice carried that quiet fire, the kind that meant promises made were promises kept. As she packed her case, I asked, my voice low, trembling, "What happens now?" She slung her bag over her shoulder, eyes fierce. "Now we build a case that will break them. And when it does, you'll be the reason justice finally found its voice." Her words landed like thunder. Sharp. Electric. When she left, the house felt strangely lighter. Ha ha ha. Almost like Helen herself had exhaled in relief somewhere among the walls. I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain against the windows, letting the reality of what had begun sink in. I had spent years being quiet, loyal, trusting. That version of me was gone now, buried somewhere between betrayal and truth. As thunder rumbled in the distance, I whispered to the empty room, my throat tight. "Mom, Aunt Helen, I'm going to finish this. For both of you." My voice cracked softly, tears warm against my skin. And for the first time, the silence that followed did not feel lonely. It felt like agreement, like the house itself was nodding back. Days blurred into each other after Agent Torres left. But for the first time in months, time did not feel wasted. It felt alive with purpose. The air itself seemed different, humming faintly, carrying a charge of anticipation, as if the world had tilted ever so slightly toward justice. Torres called every evening with brief updates, her voice calm, steady, an anchor in the storm. "We have verified the tapes," she said one night. "The voices match Justin Garrett and Richard. Moss. We are cross-referencing the dates against Meridian's internal records. Each call felt like another stone laid in the foundation. Helen had started building years ago. Each confirmation chipped away at the empire that had taken everything from me." I smiled faintly. "Oh, Helen, you were right all along. I rented a small apartment in Portland under a different name. It was nothing special, a one-bedroom with creaking floors and windows that rattled whenever trains passed. But it felt safe. Anonymous. The kind of place where a woman could quietly plan the end of an empire. Ah ha ha. Poetic justice in peeling wallpaper. Torres visited twice a week. Each time she brought new developments. "We've traced the money," she said one morning, setting a folder on the table between us. "Monthly wire transfers from Meridian's offshore account to an entity registered under Justin Garrett's name. That's how they paid him for monitoring your mother." Hearing it spoken aloud was like being stabbed with clarity. My chest tightened. He had not just betrayed me emotionally. He had been employed to do it. Paid, bought, sold. Torres flipped another page. "And here's Natalie. Payments routed through Dr. Sarah Chin's department. She was assigned to you after Catherine's death, to make sure you didn't dig too deeply." Oh. Natalie. My stomach twisted, a hollow laugh breaking through my grief. "Every smile was an assignment," I whispered. For a long moment, I just stared at the papers. It was one thing to suspect betrayal. It was another to see it reduced to numbers on a page, transactions that turned friendship and love into commodities. "What happens next?" I asked quietly. My voice felt smaller but sharper too, like a blade. Torres leaned back in her chair. "We build, we verify. We strike when we are ready. If we rush this, they'll slip through legal cracks. But I promise you, Samantha, when we move, they will not recover." I nodded slowly, my jaw set. "Then I'll wait." Waiting was its own form of torture. Every day brought a new layer of anxiety. I avoided public places, checked the locks twice, and kept the curtains closed. Sometimes I caught myself expecting Justin's car to pull up outside, or Natalie's laugh to echo through the hallway. Ha ha ha. Ghosts with perfect smiles, but those memories had lost their power. Instead, I focused on documenting everything Helen had left, scanning files, cross-referencing names, creating backups. Torres called it unofficial assistance. I called it redemption. Weeks passed. Then one evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. My pulse jumped. When I answered, Torres's voice was sharp but controlled. "It's happening. Search warrants have been approved. We move at dawn. A gasp escaped me. I barely slept that night. My mind replayed every moment. The betrayal, the courtroom lies, the motel room, the suitcase, the tapes. Every piece of pain had led here. By sunrise, the city outside my window glowed pale gold, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Torres called again at 6:45 a.m. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the rush of wind behind her. "We're in," she said. "Meridian's headquarters. Multiple locations. You might want to turn on the news." My hands shook. A tear slipped free. "Oh, Mom." "Helen, it's happening!" And then I laughed softly, broken, disbelieving. Ha ha ha. Justice finally waking up. I did. The screen lit up with live footage. FBI agents in navy jackets swarming a gleaming glass building, employees standing outside with stunned faces, and boxes of documents being carried out like trophies. Ha ha ha, trophies of truth. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Federal raid on Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Executives under investigation for fraud and homicide. I sank onto the couch, tears stinging my eyes. Oh! For the first time in years, I felt something break inside me. Not pain this time, but release. My breath came out in a sob that turned into a laugh, broken, trembling. Ha ha ha. It was really happening. By noon, the arrests began. Richard Moss was led out of his mansion in handcuffs, his once perfect composure cracked. News cameras captured the moment. Behind him, his wife turned her face away from the flashing lights while he stared straight ahead, like a man watching the world he built turn to dust. I whispered under my breath, "Justice, finally." Then came Justin. My hands trembled when I saw him on screen, arrested at his office, still in his tailored suit, still wearing that same expression of control I had once mistaken for strength. But this time, ha ha ha, that look had cracks. The image appeared on the news, his head held high, but his eyes gave him away. I saw fear there, real fear. For the first time, he was the one without power. Torres called again that evening. Her voice carried a weight of satisfaction and warning. "It's official. They're all in custody. Moss, Garrett, Chin, and Natalie Rivers." I froze. My throat tightened. "Natalie too?" "Yes. She tried to flee to Seattle. We caught her at a coffee shop near the station. She'll testify, but not without consequences." I closed my eyes, my breath shaky. The image of her smiling face flashing through my mind. The friend who had listened, comforted and lied through every moment of my life. "Ah, Natalie, what about my mother?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Torres hesitated, then said softly, "We are reopening her case. The crash reports were altered. The mechanical tampering was deliberate. The words landed like thunder. My mother had been murdered. And now finally, the truth had found its way back to her." I pressed my hand to my mouth as tears spilled freely, not just sorrow, but relief. That night, I stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. For years, I had felt powerless. Now, I realized power did not come from revenge or wealth. It came from knowing you had survived the worst. And still stood upright. Ha ha ha, still breathing, still fighting. The empire that had mocked me at a dinner table was gone. The people who had laughed at my pain were behind bars, and the woman they had tried to erase had built something indestructible out of their ashes. I whispered to the night, my voice steady but trembling. "You thought you could destroy me, but all you did was build my resolve." Somewhere, in that deep Portland quiet, I felt Helen's presence. Calm, proud. And finally at peace, it was as if she smiled through the silence. The courthouse smelled of coffee, old wood, and tension, thick enough to taste. The kind of air that hums with stories waiting to be told, and justice long overdue. Rows of cameras lined the marble steps outside as journalists jostled for angles, their voices overlapping in a chorus of speculation. Inside, I sat in the gallery, my palms sweating, heart pounding, surrounded by strangers whose eyes were fixed on the accused. The men and women who had orchestrated my mother's death, destroyed my life, and worn civility like a mask, now sat in polished suits, wrists shackled in quiet disgrace. Richard Moss looked older than the man I had seen in photographs, his once impenetrable confidence replaced by exhaustion. Dr. Sarah Chin sat 2 seats away, her expression unreadable, perhaps calculating what plea would save her career. Justin was beside her, a picture of practiced composure, pretending control, while fear bled through his stillness. And on the far right, Natalie Rivers. Her hair was shorter, her posture smaller. Her eyes refused to meet mine. The trial was not a single proceeding. It was an unfolding storm, one that lasted months. Each day exposed another layer of deceit, another thread of corruption knotted so deeply that even the attorneys struggled to trace it back to its origin. But every word, every document, every photograph that appeared on the screen was one step closer to truth. When the prosecution began its case, Agent Torres took the stand first. Calm, direct, relentless, a force of clarity in a courtroom thick with lies. She outlined the conspiracy that had connected Meridian's fraudulent drug trials to a string of suspicious deaths, including my mother's. Her testimony was a masterpiece of precision, built from the evidence Helen had collected with her trembling but fearless hands. I wept quietly, tears blurring my vision. As I watched Torres hold up a sealed evidence bag containing the cassette tapes, the same ones that had once played in the dark of that basement, the ones that had burned my world to ashes, and rebuilt it in truth. The courtroom went silent as the first recording began to play. The sound of static. Then Justin's voice filled the room. Cold, calculated, familiar. Catherine doesn't involve her daughter. She's too careful. If I can't get the files, I can at least make sure she stops asking questions. The words echoed like a blade through the air. The judge leaned forward. Jurors shifted in their seats. Every person in that room heard what I had heard in Helen's basement. Ha. The moment my husband became my mother's executioner. My breath caught, my hands clenched together, trembling. When the tape ended, Torres looked toward me briefly, her eyes soft, then back to the court. These recordings were recovered from an archive built by Helen Vaughn, she said, voice steady but thick with emotion. Her work preserved the truth that Meridian and its associates spent years trying to bury. Without her, none of us would be here. Richard Moss's attorney tried to discredit the evidence. He called Helen unstable, paranoid, delusional. The same words the world had used to silence her. But then came the financial records. Every wire transfer, every shell account, every piece of paper that reduced their empire to arithmetic crimes. The numbers did not lie. Justin's defense attorney attempted a different strategy. My client was manipulated, he said, gesturing toward Moss. He was a pawn, not a mastermind. I almost laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Ha. A pawn? A pawn does not arrange murder. A pawn does not build a marriage out of deceit. When Justin finally took the stand, the air seemed to thicken. He looked at me for the first time since the arrest. His expression was composed, but his eyes, those eyes that once made me feel safe, were searching for mercy. He did not find it. He spoke carefully, every word measured, trying to sound regretful. Samantha, I never wanted to hurt you. I was trapped in something larger than either of us. It was business, not personal. That sentence, that one sentence, broke whatever pity I had left. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp as glass. You made my mother's death a business. The judge called for silence, but it was too late. The damage was done. Justin's mask cracked, his shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw what he truly was. Not powerful, not in control, but small. So very small. Then came Natalie's turn. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Moss and Dr. Chin. I did not expect honesty from her, but what I heard still cut deep. I was offered money to keep Samantha distracted, she admitted, voice trembling. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Then I told myself I was protecting her. By the time I realized how deep it went, it was too late. Tears streaked her face, and for a moment she looked like the friend I once knew. Ah! My chest ached, but I could not find forgiveness in me. Her remorse came years too late. As weeks turned into months, the trial became national news. Every revelation was another fracture in Meridian's facade. Whistleblowers came forward. Employees testified, and families of victims filled the courtroom, their pain mirrored in mine. We wept together, strangers bound by injustice. When the verdicts finally came, the silence before the judge spoke felt infinite, a stillness so heavy it pressed against the ribs. Richard Moss, guilty on all 17 counts, including conspiracy, fraud, and second-degree murder. Sentence, 23 years without parole. Dr. Sarah Chin, guilty on 6 counts, including obstruction of justice. Sentence, 12 years. Justin Garrett, guilty on 9 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder and racketeering. Sentence, 15 years. He did not look at me when the gavel struck. His head bowed, the illusion shattered. And then, Natalie Rivers, guilty of aiding and abetting. Sentence, 8 years, with eligibility for parole after 5. As the courtroom erupted in murmurs, I sat still. Not victorious, not vengeful, just still. Justice does not erase pain. It only names it. My tears fell quietly, but this time they felt clean. Afterward, outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, voices shouting my name. Ms. Garrett, how does it feel to see them sentenced? Do you plan to write a book? Was your aunt right all along? I raised my hand, the noise dying down. This is not about me, I said firmly, my voice trembling but strong. This is about truth, and the women who died for it. My mother, Catherine Vaughn, and my aunt, Helen Vaughn, fought for honesty in a world that rewarded lies. Today, their fight ended where it should have. Here. That evening, I stood alone on the courthouse steps as the crowd thinned. The sky had turned the color of steel, soft rain beginning to fall. I looked up. Ah! And for the first time in years, the weight in my chest eased. The truth had not just set me free. Ha ha ha. It had resurrected the voices that deserved to be heard. Justice had spoken, and I had spoken with it. The storm had passed, but its echo stayed with me. Even after the final verdict, after the cameras vanished and the news cycle moved on, the silence that followed felt unreal. I had lived so long inside the noise of betrayal. That quiet seemed like a foreign country. Ah. Such stillness felt strange on my tongue. Portland felt different now. Calmer, smaller, almost forgiving. I rented a modest apartment overlooking the river, a place that smelled of cedar and rain. Every morning I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the world move without fear. Ha ha ha. Imagine that. No fear. It was strange, how peace could feel heavier than chaos. 1 week after the trial, I received a package from the court archives. Inside was Helen's final legal will, sealed and notarized. My heart fluttered as I unfolded it. A note in her handwriting lay on top. If justice finds its way home, build something with it. My throat tightened. Enclosed were documents transferring full ownership of her trust and research assets to me. Bank accounts, properties, intellectual rights. It was more than wealth. It was power. And she had entrusted it to me. For days, I wrestled with what to do next. The money was enough to disappear. to vanish into quiet anonymity and never look back. But every time I considered it, I saw my mother's face. And Helen's. And the files filled with names of victims who would never receive closure. My chest ached, tears pricked the corners of my eyes. So instead of disappearing, I began building. I started with a single desk in my apartment, and a name that felt right. The Vaughn Foundation. It began as an idea, to support whistleblowers, expose corporate fraud, and help people silenced by fear. Helen's old contacts, the ones who once dismissed her as paranoid, now returned my calls with urgency. Ha ha ha. Irony has a poetic rhythm. Truth, it seemed, had made her a prophet in hindsight. Within 6 months, the foundation had an office downtown. Nothing grand, bare walls, mismatched furniture, but alive with purpose. We hired investigators, data analysts, and legal advisors, all funded through Helen's trust. The first case we took on involved a small biotech firm accused of falsifying research data. By the time we finished, the company had collapsed, and the whistleblower we represented was free of retaliation. Each success built momentum. News. Outlets began calling, this time not for gossip, but for collaboration. Documentaries featured our work. Universities requested guest lectures. Every new victory stitched another piece of me back together. For every injustice exposed, I felt a piece of myself return. Not the naive woman who believed in happy endings, but the one who believed in truth. One evening, as the city lights reflected off the river, I sat alone in the office. The walls were covered with photos of the people we had helped: scientists, journalists, families of victims. Among them hung a framed picture of Helen and my mother. Beneath it, I placed a brass plaque that read, "They tried to silence us. We answered with truth." The next morning, I received a letter from the Department of Justice. It was a formal acknowledgement, recognizing the Vaughn Foundation as an official partner in investigative transparency programs. I laughed softly, wiping at my eyes. Ha 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 ha! Disbelief and pride tangled in one breath. For the first time, I felt that the work my mother died for had not ended with her. It had transformed. Still, some nights, the past returned uninvited. There were dreams where I saw Justin standing by the motel window, where Natalie's laughter echoed in my ears. Sometimes I woke up reaching for the old life, the home, the comfort, the illusion. Those ghosts never stayed gone. But then I remembered the truth. None of it had ever been real. And the ache would fade, replaced by something steadier. One rainy evening, I visited Helen's grave for the first time since the trial. The cemetery was quiet, the air rich with the scent of wet earth. I knelt before her headstone, tracing her name with my fingers, my voice trembling. "I did it," I whispered. "They paid for what they did, and your work. It's not forgotten. It's living through me." My tears fell freely, mingling with the rain. The wind rustled the leaves above, soft and steady, as if she were laughing gently, proud, whispering back, "I knew you would." I took it as her answer. The wind itself felt like her whisper. When I stood to leave, I caught sight of another headstone nearby. My mother's. My breath caught. I walked over and placed a single white rose at its base. "You once told me that truth always finds a way," I said softly, my voice trembling. "You were right. I just had to become the one who carried it." As I turned to go, I looked back at both graves, 2 women the world called paranoid and reckless. Ha 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 ha, how wrong they were. They had been right all along, and their courage, their wild, relentless courage, had built the foundation beneath my feet. That night, as I drove home through the mist, I thought of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and ruin, and emerged not as a victim, but as something unbreakable. The empire they built on lies was gone, and in its place, I had built one rooted in truth. Before going to sleep, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. They took my life apart, so I could learn how to rebuild it stronger. My hands trembled, tears glistening on the page. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains, soft and gold. Ah, warm like forgiveness. The storm was over, but its lessons remained. I smiled, whispering to the quiet room, "Now it's my turn to write the ending." And for the first time, ha ha ha, the ending was mine. Time does not erase pain, it refines it. Months after the trial, I learned that healing was not a straight road, but a slow return to myself. Every scar carried a story, and every silence carried a truth I had once been too afraid to speak. There are moments, even now, when I walk past a restaurant window and see couples laughing over dinner. For a split second, my mind returns to that night, to the polished glass, the glittering chandeliers, and the laughter that broke my heart. But the pain no longer stings. It lingers softly, like a ghost that smiles before fading. It reminds me how far I have come, from that version of myself who stayed silent while being broken in public. What I learned is this: revenge is not fire. It is discipline. It is the steady hand that writes truth where lies once lived. I thought vengeance meant destruction, but it meant creation, rebuilding my life with integrity so powerful that the people who tried to destroy me had to watch from the ruins of their own deceit. The Vaughn Foundation became more than an organization. It became a voice for those who had lost theirs. Survivors of corporate abuse, silenced whistleblowers, and families like mine found a place where their pain turned into purpose. The work filled the hollow spaces inside me that revenge never could. I often receive letters from people who hear my story online. Some say it gave them courage to walk away from toxic power. Others say it helped them find faith again. Each message feels like a heartbeat, reminding me that what began as my story of humiliation ended as a story of transformation. If my mother were here, I know what she would say. Truth does not need to shout. It only needs to stand its ground. She lived and died by that belief, and Helen carried it forward with defiant brilliance. I am merely the continuation of their strength, a living echo of their unfinished fight. To anyone standing in the ashes of betrayal, I say this: do not chase revenge for its own sake. Chase truth. Let it hurt. Let it tear apart the illusions you once worshipped. Then rise from what remains, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to become. Power built on deceit collapses, but power built on truth endures. On quiet evenings, I still visit the river. I stand on the bridge where the city lights scatter across the water, and I think about how everything began, with humiliation, betrayal, and a suitcase under a motel bed. That suitcase. That strange, impossible miracle. That suitcase did not just contain money. It contained my destiny. It was Helen's final way of saying, "Don't die quietly. Fight beautifully." And I did. The empire of lies is gone, and in its place stands something they never expected. A woman who knows her worth, who carries both fire and grace, and who no longer fears silence. As the wind brushes past, I whisper into the night, this was never about revenge. It was about remembering who I am. The water below reflects the city's glow, shimmering like truth itself, unbreakable, untamed, and eternal. Moral lesson: betrayal breaks illusions, not destiny. When the world tries to silence you, let your story speak louder than their lies. Truth may not come quickly, but when it arrives, it burns brighter than vengeance ever could.